From FingerLakes1.com and by FL1 Radio, this is Inside the FLX. Last week, voters in Ontario County elected a new sheriff, and on January 1st, Sheriff-elect Kevin Henderson will take his oath of office, beginning a new era in local law enforcement. Job number one for the next sheriff will be building on the last 30 years of success, much of that success led by our guest today. Sheriff Phil Povero, who did not seek another term and will retire at year's end, is with us in studio. When he retires, he will cap off a 47-year career in law enforcement, and we are going to cover a lot of ground during our conversation. But before we get to that, a quick message from today's show sponsor, so stay tuned. Inside the FLX and other programming on FingerLakes1.com is made possible by local sponsors supporting local reporting. Learn more about advertising on Finger Lakes One by clicking on the Advertise button at the bottom of our homepage.
I was severely injured. I was on a ventilator. My husband was scared, and he just went for the nearest number that he had heard advertised over and over and figured they're the best. They know what they're doing. I think that's the typical reaction. But unfortunately, it wasn't the right one. And I'm thankful that we learned that early on in the process. He decided to look for someone locally who would give us a little more personalized attention. And when we met Steve and talked with him, we knew that we had found that person. If you want to feel like you have an attorney who's in your corner, who's going to listen to you, who's going to endeavor to understand you, give Steve a call. I really felt like everyone at Madej, Mears & Rickey really cared.
For a law firm that cares about you, contact Madej, Mears & Rickey at 315-568-0911. Prior results do not guarantee a similar outcome.
And welcome back to the program. I'm Josh Durso, your host of Inside the FLX, and I have with me today Sheriff Povero, Ontario County. He is serving out the remainder of his final term, leading law enforcement efforts in Ontario County. Sheriff, thanks so much for being here. Such a long storied career now for you.
Well, thank you, Josh. It's been my entire adult life, and I truly would not have changed anything. There's certainly some days I would not care to relive, but overall I've been extremely fortunate to work with a dedicated team of professionals throughout my entire career, from its very beginning, January of 1972 up until today, that have consistently, shared in our mission to do what we can through the criminal justice system and through law enforcement to enhance the quality of life for the people who live, travel through, shop, vacation in Ontario County.
So I have to ask, when you think back to the start of your career, what was it like? Do you remember the moment when you sort of had that light bulb go off in your head and you were like, this is what I want to do. I want law enforcement to be my career. Do you remember that moment, or was it kind of a build-up?
I remember, the moment of the first day. Getting involved in the career was something that I hadn't initially planned on, but it presented itself, and I took advantage of the opportunity at the time. As I progressed and learned and became more accustomed with what was involved in the sheriff's office and criminal justice, I said, yeah, this is good. We really have an opportunity to protect and serve the people, as law enforcement says. And, realizing that through working together in the system, that people relied on us, they depended on us, and if we worked hard and were dedicated to, the principles of public safety, we could make a difference. And I realized that early on, and that's what, truly was an inspiration to make this be the career for me that it has and has, to continue for these years. And this really completes my goal at the end of the year that we set, my wife and I and others, for this and for the accomplishments that have occurred.
So one of the things that I want to talk about later in the program is just the what you leave with young people who are thinking about a career in law enforcement. But I am, to that end, I'm curious. Your life before you got into law enforcement, what did that look like? And obviously you were a young man, obviously thinking about different things, different directions you might want to go. What did that look like for you in those months and that maybe year leading up to when you actually jumped into law enforcement?
Well, in that time that led up to it, I was doing several things. I actually was 20 years old when I started in law enforcement. I was attending college. I was my father was a great man. Had his own small construction company. I worked with him when I could. I was also working in commercial broadcasting at the time, and was working at WGVA in Geneva, where I started actually working when I was 15 years old and a sophomore at Geneva High School. And so these were all playing in. I was looking at probably that time a career in broadcasting, and I was in the news field. So I was talking with organizations about broadcast journalism and furthering my education. And the opportunity, again, came about in late 1971 to join the office of the Sheriff of Ontario County when there was a change in administration there. And again, it was something that I hadn't pondered much before that time, but took the opportunity and moved on. So I was in school. I was working some with my father and his company, and I was working at WGVA in Geneva, following some news stories.
Okay, so and that's fascinating, just because the transition, I think that's something that a lot of people probably don't think of right off the bat. Someone who gets into law enforcement as someone who was in communications or broadcast journalism before that. But all right, so let's look at, I guess, the first third or so, or first half of your career. What were the big sort of moments that stood out in that first half of your career that really reminded you or reinforced that you were going down the right path and you were doing what you really wanted to do?
Right. When we really became, involved and working, day to day on the calls for service, the complaints, the public safety issues in Ontario County, I truly recognized that there were people that needed the assistance of law enforcement, that law enforcement, could be effective in protecting people, that we had an overall criminal justice system in Ontario County that was responsive to the needs of people, a district attorney's office that understood the importance of following through with the efforts that law enforcement produced in the prosecution of people who have been charged with crimes, and supporting the efforts of law enforcement by sustaining convictions in criminal court. So I think that Ontario County has been somewhat unique in this fashion, that the entire criminal justice system recognized how effective we can be when we're working together. And again, police, DA, probation, parole, other factors that organizations that contribute to overall criminal justice have truly cooperated well and worked together. And it was the cooperation that I saw, which I recognize was not necessarily the case, in other parts of New York State, that was having a positive impact on the impact that we were having in reducing crime, solving crime, and trying to avoid motor vehicle crashes, working with young people to help them in their areas. That made it, really seem like this was something that I wanted to continue to do. Within a few years of my introduction into the sheriff's office, I was very fortunate to be promoted to what was then the Detective Bureau, and spent the majority of the years before becoming sheriff as a criminal investigator. And that truly reinforced the goal that I had to be a part of law enforcement, the criminal justice system, because that opportunity as an investigator allowed me to take the time to be meticulous, to follow through, to look for the detail and the facts that were necessary to charge someone with a crime, and again, providing that evidence that was critical for a district attorney to get a conviction in court. And I just saw that we were doing so much for victims in those days with the type of crimes, be they physical crimes against seniors, crimes against children of abuse or one form of assault or neglect, were always something that when we worked very hard on and saw how we had a positive impact on children, hopefully changing their lives for the better, that was truly an inspiration to go on and to continue, in this field. And it's been an extraordinary experience, for me And I truly know that collectively, again, the key word is collectively, that we've made a difference in Ontario County in public safety.
So one of the big things that we see a lot headlines-wise is the opioid epidemic. You guys have done a lot of work on that front, and it probably feels like you guys have been climbing a mountain or scaling one at least. Talk to us a little bit about the county's efforts, and then also where you think the county stands right now in relation to, say, 5 or 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. The opioid epidemic today is still a tremendous concern. It's a serious issue that we not only face in Ontario County, but we face throughout the Finger Lakes, throughout New York State, and the drug situation throughout our country. We, again, have recognized early on that when we saw the changes, we needed to adapt and to change ourselves to try and deal more effectively with eliminating the problem. In my perspective, there are several ways to deal with the opioid addiction and other drug issues. The number one area of importance, from, again, my belief, is prevention. And I truly believe that if we can prevent people, if there's a way to convince people not to get involved with any form of drug use, then as a society, we are going to be more successful in our efforts to reduce the problem overall. It's much less costly to stop the problem at the prevention phase rather than deal with incarceration, hospitalization, or treatment follow-up after the problem does occur. And so to that regard, I think what's been important is recognizing that it's important to get the message to young people through our drug education efforts that are in all our school districts and through the school resource officers that we have instituted in Ontario County. One of the greatest accomplishments as an organization and as a county that I believe we have achieved in recent years, and the impact it can have and will have on reducing the drug issue, is the introduction of school resource officers into all school districts in Ontario County. The 7 school districts plus the BOCES complex in Flint that are outside the 2 cities, and the cities of Canandaigua and Geneva, whose police officers are assigned as school resource officers in those districts. That is truly one of the most beneficial and successful programs that I sincerely believe I have had witness to and been involved in my career. There have been many well-intentioned programs come along through law enforcement that may not have sustained the test of time. But this program for school resource officers is truly a keeper. And we need to be more responsive and supportive of that program. So prevention, having the law enforcement officers interact with students, having the law enforcement officers in the school district interact with faculty, administration, and parents, in forming that team that collectively can work together to reduce the problem of addiction and substance abuse. That ties into other areas which our officers work on with the districts, including eliminating motor vehicle crashes, again, binge drinking, and we're seeing more and more use of drugs and or alcoholic beverages with people getting behind the wheels of a car, unfortunately. And we've been working with our school districts and programs to try and prevent those issues from occurring and having those tragedies occur on the road. So when it comes to the opioid situation, it's prevention. And some of the other areas, again, it's working together. We've partnered with the Partnership for Ontario County. We began a program of drug returns at various locations in the county. We did 2 efforts in October, one in the village of Victor, one in the city of Canandaigua. The city of Geneva did a drug med return where hundreds, again, of pounds of drug, over 1,000 pounds in the month of October, were dropped off by people at sites where law enforcement took possession of the drugs, sealed them, and then we made sure they were transported to a secure facility where they were destroyed. Ontario County also leads in the installation of medication return boxes. These are receptacles that are permanently attached in facilities throughout Ontario County. They're at the Geneva Police Department. They're at the Motor Vehicle Bureau in Ontario County. They're at a pharmacy in Victor. There are several in senior housing that we've installed in Ontario County. We have more permanently installed medication return boxes that I'm aware of than any other county in this region, if not the state. And again, that part of getting the prescription meds that can lead to abuse or addiction issues, as well as emergency room visits and potential drug-induced driving while people are behind the wheel, has been phenomenal. Ontario County was recognized by the United States Drug Enforcement Administration recently for its effort in this field and being a leader in Western New York in obtaining, the return of the drugs and having them properly disposed, keeping them out of circulation, preventing young people from the opportunity of getting into the grandparents' medicine cabinet and taking these drugs, to prevent the disposal on the environmental side, the improper disposal of drugs that may end up, in our water system, and having them efficiently and safely collected and then destroyed. So there's been prevention is the key. On the enforcement side, we've been very fortunate to have the support of the Ontario County Board of Supervisors, where we've added personnel to specifically look at the drug situation and enhanced drug investigations. We've coordinated a countywide task force with the Clifton Springs and Geneva Police Departments, as well as the Clifton Springs Police Department in the county. And these investigators are tremendously busy. They are working day and night to deal with the individuals who are selling the heroin or the cocaine or the fentanyl or whatever happens to be the drug of choice that we're seeing out there today. And so we've stepped up efforts on that. We added another stop DWI traffic enforcement officer who, again, is focused on not only individuals who operate a motor vehicle under the influence of alcohol, but also, again, the sad situation where we're seeing more and more people not only drinking, but having issues with drug driving as well. And has been very successful in making arrests and getting those people off the roads. What happens after that? Well, the situation exists in Ontario County where we recognize that there are people that if they get the proper type of rehabilitative efforts and support, that they can move away from the addiction. It's a tough fight. Mm-hmm. And most people that have become addicted to opiate-type drugs are going to tell you that they feel that urge throughout the rest of their lives. But with the proper support and the proper follow-up, they can be successful and can go on to have successful lives, as so many have. So on the correction side, with my sheriff's hat looking at the jail operation that we had, we're working hard with FLACRA. We're bringing in other programs to try and work with inmates for the short period of time that we have them to change behaviors, and so that when they go back out into the communities, back to their homes, back to their neighborhoods, hopefully back to a job, that they have a program available to them that they can acknowledge for follow-up to continue on to rehabilitative programs. So hopefully, they'll stick with it, stay clean, keep a job, be a good father, be a good husband, and go on to be successful citizens. So the sheriff's office, I've always said, is a one-stop shop for when it comes to the issues of how do you deal with substance abuse issues. We focus on prevention. If that's not working, we'll look at the enforcement piece, and from the enforcement piece, we'll go on to see, have we encountered and are we dealing with people that we can benefit through corrections and other programs to rehabilitate them, to clean up their lives, and again, help to make them productive members of society.
So obviously one of the other big changes during your tenure has to be, or maybe the biggest change solely, especially for law enforcement, is the rise of technology and your guys' ability to use it positively. Talk a little bit about that and how much of a game changer that's been for you guys just on the day-to-day operations side.
I'll start with the communications piece on how technology has changed. When I first started, I did have a mobile radio in the car. We could pick up the mic and call in. Unfortunately, there were a lot of parts of Ontario County, like east of Beans Hill in Geneva, when you dipped down into the city or you went down Westlake Road, where if I picked up the mic and called, Canandaigua might not hear me, Geneva may hear me, Seneca County might hear me, but Canandaigua wouldn't hear me. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have portable radios. Back in those days, we carried around a bunch of dimes because our second most important mode of communication was go to a payphone. And there are people out there today saying, what the heck's he talking about with a payphone? Well, they did exist. They cost a dime. And many times, because of the lack of adequate radio communications we had, we would have to go to a payphone, put a dime in, and dial the sheriff's office to talk with them, to get information, etc. Jump fast forward to today. The technology, as we all know, and there are people watching this that are more technologically savvy than I am, but radios, portable radios, interoperable communications with other police agencies, with agencies joining Ontario County, the cell phone capability. We're able to text to 911 today. We're able to send out information from our dispatchers in car to car with photos of suspects of crimes, with information relative to an investigation that can show some digital photography or other data that's important to the solving of the crimes. The ability to communicate with a portable radio from the shore of Seneca Lake in Geneva to the mall, the fountain in the mall at Eastview with a portable and have crystal clear communications, is an advancement that, I was, so happy and proud to be a part of that we're able to bring to Ontario County. So communications has taken a market leap from where we were then to where we are today, and it's only going to get better, as we enhance the ability of cellular communication to 911 and the ability for 911 to track more efficiently the location of people calling on cell phones who are looking, for some sort of law enforcement or emergency medical assistance. On the side of criminology, the greatest leap forward that we may have seen in my tenure is the real sophisticated development and fine-tuning of DNA evidence. I cannot, go on to say how important it is that New York State is amongst others that have realized the importance of collecting DNA evidence from criminal suspects and being able to store that in the same manner that we take and store fingerprints from criminal suspects in that effort to identify and solve other related crimes. The impact that DNA has had on those of us in law enforcement to be able to solve old crimes, cold cases, or current cases has been phenomenal. And as more and more time goes on, that process will become more and more sophisticated and, hard to believe, but more and more exact than it is now. The introduction of DNA technology to the level we're at today has been phenomenal. And along with that, going back somewhat to communications, but adding the digital type of evidence that we collect and being able to analyze and gather that at crime scenes has become extraordinary. There are so many organizations, businesses, residences, you name it, that along sides of highways that are using cameras to routinely photograph their business, their home, etc., for security reasons. And when a crime occurs and that data can be collected by recovery of video evidence, again, that's become extraordinarily important and made our job much more sophisticated and efficient in identifying criminal suspects and clearing crimes. Just quickly on the corrections piece, during my tenure, we've been able to move from a linear type of jail downtown to a direct supervision facility in Hopewell. And direct supervision means that inmates are housed in a pod facility and they are held to a standard that their behavior is held accountable. What they do, they are accountable for. And behavior modification is a key element to the direct supervision that our correction officers practice every day in the Ontario County Jail. So again, looking away at the original premise of warehousing individuals who were charged or convicted of crimes to where we've moved to today, to looking at, again, can we have the opportunity, and oftentimes we don't have inmates for a long time, so it makes it difficult, but do we have the opportunity through direct supervision, through holding people accountable for their actions, to change their behaviors, again, so when they're released from custody, they go back, they get a job, they stay with rehabilitative efforts if they have an abuse issue, but they try to avoid reoffending, and we're trying to reduce recidivism numbers.
Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, Ontario County is big, it's expansive, it's diverse. You got your cities like Geneva and Canandaigua, but then you have sort of your growing center spaces, the 332 corridor, Farmington, and then obviously everything growing in Victor. How difficult has it been, or is it, managing that growth and that change, especially when it comes to some of the things that people think about, traffic, making sure that roads are safe, that sort of thing?
It's been a challenge, and it's been a process that all of us, not only in the law enforcement community, but in government planning, in zoning, in neighborhood, group involvement, has been looked at seriously. And throughout the history, when it comes to growth in Ontario County, be it a retail development, be it housing, it's always seriously looked at, and considered by county and local planners. Those of us in law enforcement and the criminal justice system are generally afforded an opportunity to weigh in on proposed developments or highway construction, and use the data that we collect through crash analysis, crash collection, other information we're receiving to help support data flow, to help support projected growth in traffic. Should a new development or retail area occur. So, I've always been happy that we've been an organization that planners have reached out to say, we are looking at this type of change or this type of development. What data do you have that would support traffic flow increase? How is it going to impact crime rates? School issues within a school district. All this that we can combine so that the people that are planning and looking, into the future for these types of be it housing or retail, can have some significant and real facts to base their decisions on.
So then I want to shift this to some of the reflective things. What is your pitch to young people who are thinking about a career in law enforcement? Obviously, a lot of different things in the news right now, but obviously, long career, positive career. What do you tell those young people who are, they're on the fence, they're thinking about it?
Right. We within the past year, we've graduated a basic academy of new police officers. Within the past month, we graduated a basic academy for incoming correction officers. 10 of those officers are members of the Ontario County Sheriff's Office correction team. 2 are here in Seneca County. We previously graduated a basic training academy for our communication officers, for our 911 dispatchers, and 3 of those new dispatchers are members of the Ontario County Sheriff's Emergency Communication Division. The information and the approach that I give to each one of those is to have a passion for public safety. And it's always to remember that this is about public safety, that we come to work each day realizing that we have been given an enormous responsibility and duty to do all we can to keep the public safe. Now, we're not always perfect. There are days that all of us are going to stub our toe, and we understand mistakes of the heart. But it's important for young people to realize that this is a career. This is not a job. This is a career where you truly say, when you sit down with the person and say, why do you want to be a police officer or correction? Well, I want to help people. This is great. This is what we want to hear. But this is a passion that has to exist at the beginning and has to continue through a 20 or a 25-year career. because the needs of the public will change. The needs of the public will continue to be there, but we are going to see new areas where we have to adapt to change for the needs of the public. Again, the drug situation and how that's changed, and what can we do to better deal with that and keep the public safe. If we're not able to adapt, if we can't maintain that passion, then we need to look at another field, because what we do truly can have an impact on the quality of life of the communities we serve.
So my last question for you, obviously we're appreciative of you taking some time out of the last month and a half here of your time in law enforcement. If you were able to go back, turn the clock back, and give your younger self a piece of advice that would have made the last 27 to 30 years a little bit easier, what would that piece of advice be?
I think as much as we recognize the importance of communications, I think I would be telling myself, do a better job in listening, do a better job in communicating, do a better job in understanding the needs of others, not only in the first part of my career where I was working as a police officer and dealing with the calls and the problems of issues, but later on as an administrator, and really taking the time to be someone that really listens. Now, I take a lot of pride in listening, but I often criticize myself for sometimes having too much on my plate and too large a schedule, and not giving the full attention that I should to some areas, and realizing that I need to work harder to catch up with that. So communications, again, is the key. Be a good listener, be a good communicator, stop, listen to the concerns of the people, let people talk and express themselves, and work very hard to solve their problems and make their life safe.
All right. Well, thanks for the time. Thanks for coming in, and congratulations on a great career, and enjoy retirement. Enjoy that free time you're going to have.
Thank you, Josh.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us today. We'll be back next week with another edition of Inside the FLX. Thanks to Sheriff Povero for joining us. And until next time, don't forget, download the FingerLakes1.com app for the latest news, weather, sports, and podcasts like this one directly on your smartphone or tablet. You can also listen to Inside the FLX on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.